Welcome, everybody. I'm Dr. Eva Ritvo, and I'm the host of the Living a Satisfying Life podcast. Today, we're very excited to have Tom Campbell with us, and we're going to be having a discussion about self-actualization and where our consciousness it emanates from and how perhaps we can work together to raise the consciousness of the world. So first, I'd like to introduce my co-host on this show, which is Lou Cattaruzza. So allow me to read a brief bio on each of our guests today. Lou was born in Italy and migrated to New York with his family in 1957. His early education included public and private schooling, and because he was fluent in Italian, upon graduation, he was able to find a job on Madison Avenue, where he was mentored in business fundamentals. He married his childhood sweetheart, and they launched a successful business together. He attended the EST workshop, which had a profound impact on his outlook and changed the way he experienced life in relationships as well as business. By age 30, Lou was well known for funding an investment bank that provided entrepreneurs with both intellectual and financial resources. He successfully grew this business and sold it in 1996. He then went on to form an internet media company that pioneered the production of virtual conferences in multiple different industries. For the last 15 years, Lou has been focused on initiatives that help children, adults, and businesses to live a more satisfying life using what he calls his satisfaction operating system. He draws from his life experiences, scientific insights, and newfound spiritual awakening, and he now calls himself LC or Lou Claus. Our guest today, we're very excited to have Thomas Campbell. Thomas is a physicist, lecturer, and author of My Big Toe. That's TOE, meaning theory of everything. This is a trilogy that attempts to unify general relativity, quantum mechanics, and metaphysics along with the origins of consciousness. Campbell has a long career as a scientist and a physicist. He received a BS, MS, and PhD in physics, and his work specialized in experimental nuclear physics. He worked for 30 years as a systems analyst for the U.S. Army, Technical Intelligence, as well as the Department of Defense and NASA. During his PhD studies, he was enrolled in transcendental meditation classes and discovered he had an aptitude for it. He was also introduced to Robert Moore's book, Journey Out of the Body, regarding out-of-body experiences. They ended up collaborating and forming the Monroe Institute. And Thomas claims that many of their work together has provided the insights for his later work on reality and the mechanisms of what he calls his larger consciousness system. My Big Toe trilogy develops a complete derivation of consciousness, and since its publication in 2003, it's garnered an international following. He has created his own YouTube channel with over 700 videos and many millions of followers. His videos consist of lectures, public appearances, interviews, fireside chats, and he continues to lecture around the world. I just actually heard him on one podcast saying his hobbies are work and his family, because he doesn't have time for anything else because all of this keeps him so busy. As I was thinking about my bio, I was thinking we usually say, well, he's not a rocket scientist, but I think in Thomas Campbell's case, we can say he's a rocket scientist. So we're very honored to have you here today. Lou has come up with some questions for us today, and we'll see how closely we can stick to our script. The first question, and we'll start with you, Tom. Who are your most notable influencers, and what pivotal aha moments have led you on your journey?
Well, now that's a question that I could just go on for probably all the rest of the time we have, but I'll try to make it very short. Well, of course, one would have been Bob Monroe. That was a big influence in my life because he taught me how to get around in the larger consciousness system, or as some people call it, out of body. But out of body is a very poor term. You're not really in your body, and you don't get out of your body, but that's what we call it in any case. And I was able to do that with precision so that I could get back in exactly the same altered state that I was in, last time. And that enabled me to have a stable platform that was outside of this reality system, which I could do some physics. I could see how things worked, change a variable, try it again. How did that change the result? And so on. And did that for about 35 years, just researching Oh, well, a lot of the paranormal things, the remote viewing, the using your mind to heal, um, getting information, all of those sorts of things that take place over on the intuitive side of the
Mhm.
consciousness, not in the intellectual side. All of those are in the intuitive side. And by doing that, I came up with a model of uh, consciousness. How does consciousness work? What can you do with it? Why does it work the way it does? And so on. So that was a big influence that enabled me to do that research. So that was probably what got, what's a nice physicist like me doing in a place like this, kind of a thing, talking about, paranormal and that sort of thing. Physicists avoid that, but that influenced me to research that area of reality that I didn't understand at all and had no idea what I might find there, but I knew that it was real because my own experiences repeated over and over again told me that consciousness is fundamental and that's the fundamental reality. So that was probably the biggest thing.
Would
Other
it
than
be
that,
possible to share one of those experiences with our listeners? Perhaps one that was particularly interesting, noteworthy, or profound?
oh well, I will share one, and it's probably another thing that influenced me. I was working with another person, Dennis Menerick, who was an electrical engineer, and he and I both would spend, probably 15 to 20 hours a week with Bob Monroe over about a 5 year period. And after a year or two of that, we both experienced lots and lots of unusual things. And those things that were unusual had a very high statistical significance. In other words, if you practice healing, remote viewing, mind to mind communications, you do that long enough and you've had thousands of successes, you have a feeling that this is real. And both of us came into it with, is this real? Because we're both science types and techie types. And we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just us leading ourselves down a path where we're using our imagination and so on. So we're very careful about doing things that were evidential that you could measure, as opposed to, oh, I flew around out in the larger conscious system together, today together with Dennis. Well, that's not measurable. So we didn't do a lot of that. We did things that you could then turn around and say, did this happen or did it not happen? So in any case, this one experiment, and this was one Bob Monroe dreamed up, was for Dennis and I to go out of body together, meet in the air up above the lab in non-physical space, then stay together and go on some sort of an adventure. And the way the lab was set up is there were booths that were acoustically isolated. So you could shout in one and you wouldn't be able to hear it in the next. And there were three of these booths, and there was an empty one between Dennis and I. So it was kind of doubly, insulated. So we couldn't hear each other. And there was a microphone down in front of my mouth, and Bob would ask us questions or whatever, report in. What are you seeing? What are you experiencing now? And we could talk to him individually, or he could talk to both of us. But Dennis and I never could hear each other. So that was the setup. So he said, Tom, Dennis, go get together, meet someplace, go on an adventure in the non-physical, and we'll see what happens. But just stay together. Well, after about 2 hours of that in this booth, Dennis and I kind of stumble out into the light of the lab, and Bob looks at us and said, "Well, do you think you were together?" And we kind of looked at each other, and both of us said, "Well, it seemed like it. Yeah, we think so." And Bob said, "Well, listen to this." And he rewound both of our tapes. He was recording all the things that we said,
Mhm.
and then he flipped the run switches on both of them at exactly the same time, so they would be, you know, coordinated with each other in time. They would both be time. And there was Dennis and I uh, answering each other's questions, having conversations where I'd ask him something and he would reply to that. And all this was done, of course, in a non physical. We would see things, we met people, we had um, a long and very detailed and unusual adventure. So it wasn't like I was in a gray cloud. I was too. Oh, well, we must have been there together, where nothing's evidential. So there was lots of specifics going on. And it was just as clear as day. There was Dennis answering my questions, me pointing out things to Dennis, who would say, "Oh, yeah, I see that thing. It's the thing with the da 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 da." And I say, "Yes, that's right." And over to the left, do you see that? And he says, "Do you mean that tall tower?" And I say, "Yes, that's what I mean." So it was that kind of a back and forth conversation. And though I had been going out to the lab with Dennis for probably, I don't know, at least a year, maybe even two before then. And I knew intellectually that the things that we were doing were real. That wasn't a question intellectually, but getting it intellectually and getting it at a deeper level are two different things entirely.
Mhm.
And as I listened to that 2 hour long conversation and interaction between Dennis and I, that hit me very, very hard in the sense that for about 2 weeks, I was kind of out of it thinking, "My God, this is real. This is really real.
Oh my
So
goodness.
it sunk down into a level at that point that wasn't intellectual, but much deeper than intellectual. And from then on, I no longer asked the question, "Is this real?" I wasn't constantly trying to collect data to verify to myself that it was real, because I'm a physicist. I don't want to be convinced of something if it isn't real. So that was at that point was a big fork in the road, because I didn't say, "Is this real?" anymore. I knew at a very deep level that I and my experiences were real experiences, and the things that were there were real things. Now I had the problem of, how does this make sense? Where? What's going on? How? What is this place? What are its limits, and what does it mean, and how is it constructed, and how does it relate with this reality? Because it does relate with this reality, and why is it there? What is its function? So I'm a scientist. I try to figure out how things work. What's the nature of reality? That's what physics is all about. What's the nature of reality? So that's why I did all this research over 35 years. Do something, has an effect that's measurable, then change a variable, do it again. Does it
That
change the effect?
is
And
such a profound moment it must have been in your life to have
yeah,
something like that occur. I mean, I
it
just
was
can't
very
imagine.
profound. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I say, I was kind of in a daze for just a couple of weeks with the enormity of it, because I'm a scientist.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah, yeah, yeah.
intellectually. Oh yeah, I get it. Sure, we're doing all these wonderful things,
Right.
but when that finally gets to you at that deep level,
Yeah.
then it's a profound change, kind of sea state change in how you see reality, in the reality in which you live. You no
Yeah.
longer live in that reality you used to live in. You live in one that's bigger than that,
Yeah.
and more complex. So I spent the next 35 years then trying to understand, how does it work? What are the rules? Because it wasn't just a random place. Things could be repeated. If it's not random, then it has rules. It has structure. It has purpose. So it isn't random. So what is that structure? What is that purpose? And so on. So that's then, after about 35 years of doing research, there is when I wrote the books, My Big Toe. I wrote that basically as a theory of consciousness. It was all about consciousness. And then I realized, of course, that consciousness is fundamental. It's not something that the brain makes, it's fundamental. And I was a physicist, so I had all these facts about consciousness from my research. I had all of these facts about the objective world from being a physicist. So I thought, I need a model that puts all that together, because there needs to be a one understanding in which all of it makes sense and none of it is conflicting with any of the rest. And that was the My Big Toe, the theory of everything, is that model. And then about 2 years after I published that, I realized that, and I'd kind of known this intellectually, but I didn't have, again, a deep level understanding. And that was that you're going to have to be able to derive physics from consciousness. If consciousness is fundamental, then physics has to be a derivative of that fundamental thing. And I went, how do you derive consciousness? I mean, physics from consciousness? And then I got an aha moment, talk about aha moments there. And there it was. I saw it. It was perfectly clear. And after that, things in probably the next 3 months, I realized that I could derive quantum physics from first principles. I could derive relativity. I could explain all of the paradoxes in physics. Physics is just full of paradoxes. We've got a lot of things that we see, we measure, we know they're like that, but we don't have a clue why they're like that. They just are. And those are called paradoxes. We don't know. And this model then of reality was able to derive everything that is objective, all the sciences. It creates a better, more general physics.
Mhm.
And it also created a science of the subjective. So I ended up with a science of the objective, a science of the subjective. Now, the science of the subjective tells you all the, it makes subjective interactions in life and experiences understandable. So you know why you are the way you are subjectively. You know, why you feel that way, why you're struggling in your life and not happy. So
Yeah.
the subjective science kind of lays out, which is what you guys talk about, because you talk about being happy and fulfilled and life is good kind of a
But
thing. Well,
we love what you say. We love to come to that through the angle that you describe, right?
Mhm.
With decreasing entropy and needing to be in
yes,
the space of love, the opposite of space of fear. That's why Lou and I are so
yes,
attracted to your work. We've come to the same conclusion, but quite humbly, not exactly from the same intellectual pursuit. But
mhm.
it really does resonate nicely with our beliefs.
Yeah. Well, good. I've noticed that my work and the things that I say and the conclusions I come up with, they've been around a long time.
Uh-huh.
2,500 years
Oh,
ago, the
yeah.
Buddha said that, reality was an illusion. Well, I say it's a virtual reality. There's not much difference there. The Buddha didn't have the concept of virtual reality, but we're saying the same thing. So these ideas have been around a long, long time.
Yeah.
And there are many thousands of paths that will take you to the truth.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They're all expressions of the truth, and all expressions of the truth do lead to the same place.
Mhm.
So there's lots of people like you and I who say, "Oh yeah, my life has kind of shown me the same sort of things, and I kind of resonate with your path." Well,
The-
there's
It's nice.
lots of independent paths, and they're all necessary, and they're all good.
What's nice about the times right now is that there's so many individuals that are actually on the same journey as we are to be able to share this experience, the kind of experiences that we've had to add credibility to their prospects of finding and discovering. And so there is this awakening that's occurring. And we simply, I think, a part of that, and anyone that we get in touch with, that we're able to provide some opening to this possibility is extremely satisfying for me. I know I'm sure it's satisfying for you, especially with the work that you're doing with Tom's Park and those kind of systems. Some of those systems are similar in the kind of things that I've been worked on. And if you don't mind, I'd be happy to share a little bit quickly about some of the things, Eva, if you don't mind, unless you want to continue.
Well, you mentioned Tom's Park, and I think it's important, to just have Tom describe that to our
Okay.
listeners, in case they don't know what that is.
I think in question 2, by the way, that not for anything, but I think we get to that experience. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Tom's Park was born out of a course that I gave, because in my talks and lectures, I would always tell people, don't believe anything I tell you. Don't believe it, because believing it or disbelieving it, neither one of them is going to take you anywhere important. You
Mhm.
have to live it. You have to be it. You have to experience it. And if it's not your experience, it's not your truth. Just reading a book and being able to chit chat about it intellectually maybe gives you some structure to work with and has some value to it, but it's
Yeah.
not going to help you grow up. It's not really going to help you change who you are. So I had a course where I taught people how to interact with the larger reality. So, and we talked about communications, remote viewing, healing, and lots of these things. And I had a group of people who lived out of their intellects mostly, very intellectual. They lived out of their heads. They did not make much contact with their intuitive side at all. And they struggled with it. They struggled and struggled trying to experience this experience of the larger consciousness system. So I created another way to get there besides the typical meditation, learn to clear your mind, have a low noise mind, learn to focus, learn to have all of your mental energy all focused into exactly what it is you're doing, be clear about what you're doing and be clear about why you're doing it. That's the typical path. That's the standard path that I think most of us have always used. Well, the Tom's Park takes a different path altogether, just for these people who are bound into their intellects and have a really hard time letting go of that intellect, which of course spoils the experience when you're in an intuitive space. Those two are kind of incompatible with each other. When you're in the intuitive space, you need to get out of the intellectual space, or at least be able to hold the two of them separate, in your mind. So in any case, I created this park, which was a place that was very safe to go and had all sorts of experiences that you could smell, you could taste, you could feel, you could be a part of. It was all a complete, 5 sensory experience. And the methodology then, rather than go through meditation and trying to subdue the intellect, was to just imagine yourself being there. Imagine yourself interacting with the things that are there. There were lots of animals there, and all of them talked. You could converse with all of them, and it was a kind of a magical place. And anyway, the idea was to get your imagination developed to the point, which may take people 10 or 20, 30 times there, but eventually get your imagination developed to the point that you could just start the ball rolling with your imagination, and pretty soon the story just kind of got a life of its own. In other words, you were no longer playing both sides of the conversation like you started out. You just let it flow however it did. Let the story unwind however it did. And when you got to that point, well, that's not intellectual. That just leaves you in a space which is exactly where you need to be to to go out of body and do intuitive things. It puts you into an intuitive space without even mentioning the word meditation.
Yeah.
It's just going through the imagination. And I made an arrangement with the larger consciousness system that as these people got their imaginary stories, it would start passing them into streams that would take up, with that story, add on to that story, and then they could then lead the story on to wherever it wanted to go, to help maybe those people learn something or go someplace they wanted to go or talk to who they wanted to talk to. So then the imagination became the launching pad rather than the taming of the intellect and getting into the intuitive side, was the launching pad. And it made it just a lot easier for a lot of people to launch out of their imagination, out of discipline. The other path is really a path of mental discipline, and that takes years to develop that mental discipline. But I found that in days you could learn how to imagine. You could learn how to daydream to the point that the daydream takes on a life of its own, and you're no longer making up the story. The story's just happening. So that was really what Tom's Park was. And I created this park where there are all sorts of things to do. You can snorkel and scuba dive and swim and jet ski and a beautiful environment, and go hiking in the mountains and on the beach. And it just was, I tried to create an environment that was safe and that was multisensory, because the more senses you involve in your daydream, the less room your mind has for intellectualizing. So if you get really involved in all your senses in that daydream, the intellect just kind of gets squeezed out into the margin, and pretty soon you've forgotten that this is your daydream. You've just gotten into the story and are experiencing the story. So that's really what Tom's Park was about. It's just a little book that basically gives the directions of how to interact and how to get around in the park. I think it's only like 60 pages long. It's real simple, but it's a
It's
training course.
yeah.
That's a training course that you can use all the rest of your life to help you develop your intuitive side, to where that intuitive side is just as reliable and just as accurate as your intellectual side. And I would say actually more
You know,
accurate
Tom,
and more reliable.
in
Yeah.
watching some of the folks that actually attend your event online, and they're talking about going to Tom's Park. It is so amazing to listen to their conversation, that it seems so real and so absolutely real. And I understand this idea that the intellectual side negates the idea that that imagination is real. They tend to say, no, imagination is not real. And what I get very clearly from that experience and watching these folks is it's as real as it could possibly be. They are actually having fun. They're enjoying their experience. And it takes time for them to a little bit to get to that awareness and get rid of the clutter of that doubting mind. But when they get there, they're just ecstatic, and it's wonderful to see.
Well, that's the idea of a virtual reality. Is in a virtual reality, there's nothing more real than information. Information is as real as it gets, and your daydreams, your night dreams, and your awake in what we call the physical universe. They're all equally real. They're just different. They have different rules, different things you can do there. But they're all experiences. And the name of the game is to grow up by making better choices. That means in these experiences, and you can grow up by making good choices in any of these realities. So to think that one is more or less real than the other is just wrong. They're just different. They're different sets of experiences that you can have in these different places, all of which are helpful to your own evolution. So yes, there isn't anything more real than a data stream, than information.
So
It's funny you used the word grow up, because what I was thinking is that children live in that space of imagination, and we sort of take that out of them as they go through school, and we put everything to a logic and learning and memorization, and children are so joyful. And so it seems to me that one of the things that you're doing is allowing people to tap back into what actually is intuitive, to be in that space and to be more joyful. And we just tend to unlearn that, I think, as we go through the standard educational process.
Yes, absolutely.
I want to be sensitive to the time. It looks like we got about 19 minutes left. So I want to be able to get to that awareness, how our systems are working side by side towards that end of self-actualization, which is the topic that we're trying to stay on course with. For your information, where you haven't, I'm sure you haven't been aware of the work that we've been doing from the biological perspective of having individual experience that they actually can cause their well-being to occur on demand.
Sure.
And that process there comes from understanding and becoming aware that one is wired with the right chemicals, that when we use our free will to choose to be kind, caring, and grateful, it stirs up those chemicals, oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine, and puts one in a state of well-being. Now, from that perspective, it means that in order for it to occur for a long period of time, one has to become self-aware that they're operating life in what I call a fear operating system, with the one that we're born with. And that as soon as we become aware of that, and we choose to be able to transcend that, we start by understanding our biology. And then we start changing our mind to a contributing mindset, so that everything that we do, we come from a contributing mindset, whether it is we're contributing to our body for its well-being, we're contributing to our relationship for its well-being, or we're contributing to anything. It's a mindset shift that needs to occur so that the avatar is healthy, is functioning well. And the more we get individuals, from my perspective, to get to that place quickly, so that they understand that there is that the old system may come in once in a while, but if you are transformed, if you are awakened to the idea that you have free will and that you can make the choices necessary, then you take control of who you are. You are more in control of who you are, and you operate in a state of mind that it's opened. It's not a closed system. I call it, it's really an open system. And that system there, I work on with a thing called a satisfaction operating system, SOS. So Living SOS is a workshop that allows individuals to become aware of that, that they can then, as soon as they wake up in the morning, come from a contributing mindset. In whatever they do, pet their dog, say hello to their wife, go outside for a walk, say hello to someone. It shifts the consciousness in a way that all of a sudden a neighborhood changes, you change, the neighborhood change. I say that on a personal experience because that's what's happened in my own neighborhood. And people are just more caring about each other, recognizing that when they have that shift and they now operate unconditionally, it's become a habit. It's simply a habit. And that, I think we're very close in our thinking about that. If this world needs to have a transformation in order for it to be more harmonious and loving and caring, is that we need to know ourselves physically, biologically, and we need to know ourselves spiritually. Because where you're coming from, even the scientist that you are, is that you are really, you have discovered that spiritual side, that consciousness side. And listening to you and to some of the other folks that Don Hoffman was talking about consciousness the other day, you had an interview with him. I am so clear today for myself that I am not my body, I am not my mind, that in fact I am energy that is conscious and aware, has free will, and is tethered to the largest consciousness system. And then when I surrender to that idea, I no longer operate from that insecure mindset that occurs in that fear operating system program. But now all of a sudden, I am spontaneous. There's integrity in the conversation. There's nothing to do but to tell it the way it is. And there is no fabrication that's needed. It's just spontaneous. So from that point, in having people become aware that there are lots of places that they can now go to get grounded to the fact that they're not their body, they're not their mind, they're in fact energy conscious that is aware, that has the ability to continue on. There should be no fear of death. There is no need to do that. And if your avatar falls away, it'll become consciousness and multiply. And we'll have that conversation a little bit later on. But this is the place where I'm at with this, and I'm so thrilled that you're on that wavelength, and that we're getting together. I still say that I would have paid forever to have your out-of-body experience at the Moreau Institute, because it would have saved me a lot of time to get to this place. You have other questions, Eva?
Yes, but I wanted to see if Tom wanted to comment on any of that first.
Oh, no, I agree with all of that. That's right on to the way my model is and the way I think. The mind leads, the body follows, or consciousness leads, the body follows. So,
Yeah, that's right.
and you can modify physical reality with your intent. Our intent modifies the probability distributions from which
That's it.
physical reality is computed. So it all works together. And you have people who are, just as an example, people who live in a very negative space. They're insecure. They are not very happy in their life. And because of that, they end up getting depressed, and then they go to the doctor, and the doctor will give them something that boosts their serotonin.
Yeah.
Well, why is it that they have that low serotonin? And the doctor will say, well, it's just like, some people, you know, need chemicals to help, do where their body doesn't work right. But it's not that way at all. It's because they live in a negative space that
Absolutely.
their body then starts to adjust to that negative space,
That's
and
right.
they stop producing those, that those the chemicals that they need, as you say, the things that give you oxytocin and
Yeah. Derek,
other kind of
Bruce Lipton says it
good.
very nicely. He's really got it
Yeah,
nailed down on the biology of
yeah.
that biology.
I do though, as a psychiatrist, feel that it's very important for me to jump in, that there are multiple paths, as you said earlier, to help people.
Oh,
And
yes.
oftentimes medication is extremely helpful and life-saving. So as my
Yes.
hosting this, I need to be clear about that. That it's wonderful if you can change your intention and the biology follows. And if you can do that, wonderful. But there are many people who can't use that approach. And I think it's very important that those people don't feel stigmatized if they do have an approach that is helpful for them. And I've seen it with my own eyes countless times, that when someone is in a state of depression or anxiety, that the medications can be very, very, very important and life-saving for them. So I think, it's a complicated topic, but I really liked what you said earlier, is that everybody has a different path. So we all have a different
Mhm.
path to getting to that spiritual awareness, that awakening.
Yeah,
We all
that's
have a
it.
different path to living our most satisfying life. And I think medication is a powerful tool that we have in 2023. In 2033, who knows? As you said, it maybe, I think one of your other podcasts, you said maybe by 10 years from now, there'll be such a shift in consciousness that we'll all be operating in a very different way. Certainly, I think we've all experienced the last 10 years have been incredibly transformative. So there is hope for the future. But I just had to interject that because of my own paradigm and my science background and 30 years of practicing. So let's see if we can just get to our last question here before we run out of time, which is, how can all of our viewers participate in helping themselves and others wake up to this knowing that both of you have so clearly defined? Tom, you already mentioned one pathway through the Tom's Park, and to being able to use the intuitive side of the mind. I think Lou's paradigm is through science, biology, belief, and understanding that we can cause our own satisfaction by shifting from a fear-based operating system to a love-based operating system. I liked the way you described that, Tom, as a decrease in entropy. And maybe you'd like to take a moment about explaining that concept to our listeners.
Okay. Well, gee, I have a whole lot of things to respond to there. And
Great.
I'll start out, Eva,
You got
saying,
9 minutes, Tom.
no, I won't disappear at 3 o'clock. I can go on and on if
No,
you, unless,
Just
you and I are going to
jumping
go
off.
on and on. Don't worry.
oh, I see. Well, it's only three. You not, Eva, you don't have an appointment till 4, right?
Yeah, I have 9 minutes. It's 3:51 right now.
Okay.
We're
So
Eastern time.
let,
Yeah.
let me respond to that quickly then. I agree with you, Eva. I think the medicines and the drugs can be extremely helpful, because what they do is they help people, when you get depressed and when you kind of wallow around in self-pity and negativity, it's hard to climb out of that hole. It's very
Very much.
difficult. And what the medicines do is it gives you a break. It helps you get out of that hole. All right, you're not doing it yourself. The medicine is, but it puts you in a space where you can outgrow it. Whereas if you stay in that negative space, you're lost. You're just
Correct.
stuck at the bottom of that hole. So yes, the medicines can be very, very valuable for people to grow.
Great.
So I wanted to yeah, kind of push that point. It's true. We don't throw away medicine just because we can use our minds, because we're not that grown up yet.
Yes.
Like people will ask me, he says, well, if you can heal yourself, then just don't go to the doctors. And I tell them, no, that's not a good idea.
Mm.
Because let's say that you decide that you've got this lump here and you're hoping it's benign, but you really don't know. But you're not going to go to a doctor to find out because, you're going to heal it on your own. Well, that's probably not a good idea because there's going to be a part of your mind that's going to say, I probably should go to the doctor. If I just do this and I'm wrong and I end up and that's cancerous and I die from it, I wish I had gone to a doctor and had it treated earlier. That part of your mind is going to start worrying and it's going to be looking at the negative outcomes, and that puts energy into that negative outcome happening.
Yeah.
So not going to the doctor can also make the problem worse. So what you need to do is just use your intent, try to move yourself into a positive space where that's benign and not cancerous. But after you've done that for, say, a couple of weeks, well, if you haven't made a difference in a couple of weeks, you probably won't make a difference in a couple of months. So you do that for a couple of weeks and then you go to the doc. And now the probability that test, that biopsy comes out benign is much higher. Well, good for you. But if you don't go to the doc, you'll probably make it a lot worse because that's just the nature of us. We are full of fear, and that fear tends to
Oh boy.
create problems for ourselves. So, yes, we don't throw away medicine just because we can heal ourselves. We're not perfect people yet. We've got lots of negativity that we generate.
I
So
think
let me
also,
jump.
if I just may say something, that cancer unfortunately multiplies very, very quickly. So again, for our listeners out there, if you have a concern, it is good to go to the doctor as soon as possible, because then that optimizes the chances of success. So if you have any concern or issue, in my strong opinion, it's good to go to a doctor right away and get it checked out, because then, as you say, you'll have the reassurance. If it is nothing, then that will decrease your worry, and then that increases the probability that everything will go well. If you live in that gray zone, unfortunately, cancer can multiply quite rapidly, and it can move from localized to spread, and then becomes quite dramatically harder to treat. So I think 2023, my belief is we should use the tools that we have. And since modern Western medicine is our most evolved tool, we should access that. At the same time, people should be studying other techniques. But until we feel that they're on a playing field, we want to make sure to live your most satisfying life, you're tapping into the tools that we have, which is, examination, scans, biopsies, etc., and conventional treatment. In the meantime, believe me, we'd be thrilled if the other area grows and expands and we can have other accesses to treat some of these diseases. I know in one of your tapes you said humanity is like at the daycare level now. So I would say that in terms of healing our bodies with our mind, we're definitely, not very sophisticated yet. And if some people have tapped into it like yourself, fantastic, and please stay well and keep studying. But in the meantime, to live one's most satisfying life in Western society right now, there is a lot that Western medicine can offer if you're already at the stage of cancer. My belief, and Lou's belief, I think, is that prevention, and I'm sure this is your belief too, prevention is the most important thing. Most of us are fortunate enough to be born well and healthy, and there's definitely many things that we know to continue that state, including a positive intention that I am healthy, I will go to the gym, I will choose foods that nourish my body, I will get sleep tonight. And I think that's a very important pathway.
I agree.
Well said. Well, I apologize that I have to go work as a doctor and cannot stay on with you two wonderful gentlemen, but I look forward to listening to the rest. And Tom, please keep well and keep doing everything you're doing. I'm so glad you're so. Yes. It was a delight to be with Tom Campbell today, and I wish we had more time together to hear more about your theory of everything. But in the meantime, I hope we've sparked our listeners to go on YouTube. You have many, many other videos with wonderful content that, in fact, I was feeling unwell, Lou knows, this weekend, and I was listening to you over the weekend, and you definitely helped me feel very state and to live their most satisfying life. And thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.